The Catholic Church, Church of Hell.
The Catholic Church is facing scandals and being forced to pay millions of dollars.
In the 1980s and 90s, the press reported crimes that seemed inconceivable.
Sins of the fathers.
Case after case of alleged sexual misconduct.
Committed by Catholic priests and covered up by bishops.
The bishop was warned about Koss's behavior, but kept moving him around.
In 2002, revelations reached a crescendo.
Sparked by the release of thousands of pages of documents.
You're a filthy pig.
Responding to the crisis, America's bishops enacted reforms and made a promise.
To bring an end to sexual abuse in the church.
More than a decade later, new disclosures continue to make headlines. Some priests have faced consequences, but what about the bishops who covered up their crimes?
39-year-old Father Gilbert Gothay has admitted that he sexually abused at least 35 boys.
In 1985, the first case of a priest accused of sexual abuse to get major media attention came from the small town of Henry, Louisiana. Nearly as shocking as the charges was the fact that church leaders had heard allegations for years.
In sworn statements, the head of the local diocese, Bishop Jared Fry, has admitted learning about a child molestation involving Father Gothay 10 years ago.
An article about the Gothay case caught the attention of Barbara Blaine, a devout Catholic who says she had been abused starting at age 13 by her parish priest, Father Chet Warren.
That abuse was happening during the time that I was growing up and discovering who I am as a person. So the whole coloring of my psyche was that I was evil and made this good holy priest sin.
At age 29, Barbara reported Father Warren to officials in her diocese, all the way up to the bishop. But over the next few years, her frustration grew as Warren remained in ministry.
Those church officials were clearly not helping. They were only making matters worse for me. And so I thought, I'll just find some other victims. We can research this and educate ourselves, and we'll figure this out.
Although Warren has denied wrongdoing, 7 more women would make allegations against him before he was suspended from ministry in 1993. By that time, Barbara Blaine's network of victims had grown into the hundreds and taken the name SNAP.
Survivors Network for those abused by priests.
As you were.
Exactly. In the early to mid-90s, the way our movement grew was by these talk shows. Every time one of the shows aired, more victims would contact us.
How the Catholic Church kept these confessions silent for so long, despite reports from 3 states.
As more scandals broke, it became clear the problem was often not just crime, but cover-up.
Every bishop is the ruler of his own diocese and reports only directly to the Pope.
That prevented anyone ever knowing how bad it was inside the church, which is what they were just trying to prevent the secrets from getting out.
As a young priest at the Vatican Embassy in Washington, D.C., Thomas Doyle had co-authored a report in 1985 that warned sexual abuse cases were probably the single most serious and far-reaching problem facing our church today. And that was nearly 17 years before the earthquake that hit Boston in early 2002.
John Gagin is accused of molesting and raping boys as young as 4 years old over a period of 34 years.
But documents uncovered by the Boston Globe suggest church officials covered up Gagin's crime.
What's more, Father Gagin and other accused priests had been protected by Boston's Cardinal Bernard Law, once called the most powerful Catholic in America. By the time the U.S. bishops arrived in Dallas for their annual spring assembly, they faced media scrutiny like never before.
A 3-month investigation by the Dallas Morning News reports nearly 2/3 of bishops protected priests accused of sexual abuse and allowed them to keep working over the past several decades.
In the ensuing years, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has commissioned studies revealing that since 1950, some 17,000 minors have reportedly been sexually abused by over 6,000 clergy.
The people who are in positions of authority who allowed this to go on and who have covered up the sex crimes are still in those positions.
The bottom line is that there are consequences for priests who abuse. There are no consequences, or there have been none, from the Vatican for bishops who have in any way enabled that abuse.
I truly regret. Case in point, Kansas City Bishop Robert Finn. Although he was convicted in court for failing to report a priest who took pornographic photos of young girls, Finn is still bishop today. And even Cardinal Bernard Law, who resigned as head of the Boston Archdiocese after mishandling sex abuse cases, went on to preside over one of Rome's most important churches and remained on a Vatican committee that handled cases of sexual abuse.
Some people said, gee, what a relief for him. He didn't have to clean up the mess he made. He got to move on to Rome.
To date, sex abuse cases have cost the church and its insurers over $3 billion. But especially since 2002, victims have also pressed for the church to turn over its files on accused molesters. In early 2013, the Archdiocese of Los Angeles released thousands of pages, revealing that in the 1980s, Cardinal Mahoney and a top aide tried to shield admitted sex abusers from law enforcement. Barbara Blaine is hoping people won't forget. When a United Nations panel in Switzerland recently subjected Vatican officials to an unprecedented full day of questioning, Blaine was there with questions of her own.
Number one is, are they turning the evidence of sex crimes over to the police? And number two, are they punishing any of the bishops who have enabled and covered up for the sexual predators? If they would do either of those two things, that would give me hope that children will be protected in our church. But they failed to do either one.